Mike, I am just so excited to have you on the show. You also are like a dear friend of mine and someone that I've just been able to talk shop with, and also this incredible co-founder of Soul CBD. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited. Yeah, I think there's very few people that understand the difficulties of trying to run a CBD business when with all the compliance and headaches. So it's nice to like vent and talk shop a little bit sometimes.
You came in such a pivotal part of me like growing and working through Get Super that I'm just so thankful for you. But you also just have this incredible background and story. And I want to kind of just dive into this. So Mike, you
Mhm.
are not just like a co-founder, you're not just an entrepreneur, you're actually like a fighter, a title fighter. And
Mhm.
you went down this whole journey into understanding kind of this autoimmune disease. And I want you to kind of start there. I want you to start with how this led you to creating Soul.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I was a professional fighter for almost a decade. I got signed by Top Rank out of the amateurs at like 21 years old. And so for me, it was a dream come true. And I had no idea whether I'd go one fight or 30 fights or fight for titles or not. But a lot of ups and downs throughout that journey I'm super grateful for. I ended up retiring about 3 years ago and retired with a 21-1 record and fought for some belts like you mentioned and got to fight in some incredible arenas. My last fight at MGM Grand in Las Vegas for a world title. So yeah, super grateful for that. And obviously it took a lot of hard work, dedication, so many different things that I learned mentally transitioning into being an entrepreneur and quite literally getting knocked down and getting back up again. So literally and figuratively, I've gone through that. But during my career in about 2013, I was about 12-0. I started to get really sick. And like so many people that deal with autoimmune issues, it went years and years really undiagnosed. And my immune system was shutting down. I was getting headaches. I was getting terrible back pain. I was getting joint pain, just systemic inflammation, and everything started kind of shutting down. I was eventually diagnosed with autoimmune disease. And then from there, just so many other things tacked onto it. I had mold, parasites, heavy metals, and worked really, really hard to get myself healthy, honestly. And so the last part of my career was definitely more of, pushing myself into it. Everything was more difficult. Recovery was more difficult. Training was more difficult. But the blessing that came out of it and the gift that came out of it is, my knowledge and really just understanding my body and natural solutions to these things I was struggling with. Because for a long time, I was just on medications, prescription medications. I was on 8 different medications, in fact, at one
Wow.
point. And so, being addicted to painkillers and on antidepressants and anti-anxiety, and it just, you trust people because they're wearing a white coat and not that they have malicious intent. But I just knew in my gut and my instincts that like number 9 wasn't going to be the answer. So it
Mhm.
led me down this road of discovering about nutrition and breath work and hot cold contrast and supplementation and just really adding more tools to the tool belt. And that was the birth of Soul and how I discovered CBD. It helped me get off anti-anxiety. I was on lorazepam for a long time, and it's like at this point it's like of course I was my entire life and identity was stripped away from me, and I was 26 years old. So of
Wow.
course I had anxiety, of course I had depression. So
Yeah.
it helped me get off these things and led me down a different path. And now I'm just grateful to be able to help other people get out of pain.
I mean, what a story. And also I love that you kind of touched on something where I mean my struggle with anxiety is very similar to yours, where it was like, I was kind of diagnosed in the height of the pandemic, lost 75% of the business, and it was kind of like this like diagnosis that came from, the therapist of like, holy shit, my whole life is now going to be turned upside down. And, that was one thing where there had been a level of addiction in my family. So I
Mm.
wasn't going to go on medication because of what I had previously seen with certain family members. So when you started, how did you start incorporating CBD? Like, were you just like researching everything? Were you researching like holistic solutions? Like, what led you to CBD? And then what did that start to look like in your body and the way that you felt?
Yeah, I started at a very low dose, and I was getting drug tested at the time. So it was really important that I was taking things that I trusted. And
Yeah.
that was the most difficult part. And another reason why we wanted to start the company, it's like there were very few reputable companies out there that I felt like I could take these products and not test positive for THC,
Mhm.
for heavy metals, for all these other things. So, um, you know, coming across it that direction really kind of steered me towards, well, I'm going to create a solution. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But I started really slow, and I noticed for me the first thing was anxiety. And here's
Mhm.
the most important thing about CBD and why people get confused with it in terms of why it helps with sleep, but also pain, but also anxiety. And what it does is it activates your endocannabinoid system, and it puts your nervous system into homeostasis. And so um, I think there's a trickle down effect with that. And for me, I was in such fight or flight that
Yeah.
all these other symptoms were just being exacerbated by the constant stress that I was in. So yes, it helped with anxiety, but it also started to help with pain, and it started to help with inflammation and all these other things that I think really were a result of me being constantly in fight or flight. So I just started taking it more and more. And then I remember calling up my sister, who's my co-founder, Angie, and telling her about it. And she's like, is this going to get me high? And that's the number one question we got. And it just kind of shows you where we were in our journey years and years ago. But it was one of those things that we found so much success in, and we found it was such a low risk, high reward thing for us. And so anytime that I could turn to a solution that I felt was safe and
Mhm.
is low risk, high reward, I was more open minded to it.
That's so beautiful. So what what made you say, okay, I found the solution, which was CBD. Now I want to go start a brand. And you have, Soul CBD, but now you're actually branching out into more wellness-based products as well. So
Yeah.
what was the connection here of like I'm feeling better and now I'm going to go straight into being this entrepreneur and launching this brand with Angie.
Well, once again, like my entire life, pain has
Mm.
led to some of the greatest things that I now have or do or have experienced. I 2 fights ago, I think in 2018, early 2018, I fractured my rib. I broke my rib in the second round of a fight, and I had to go 8 more rounds with a broken rib. It was for a title fight back home in Chicago, one of the belts that I have behind me. I somehow won to this day, and it was the worst pain of my life. I think adrenaline really took over. And so I did, I did the interview. People could tell I was hurt and injured, but I got through the fight. I did the interview in the ring, got back to the dressing room and collapsed. And they
Oh my
sent
God.
me to the ER. And so I was in the hospital till about 4 a.m. with a broken rib and actually a torn ligament as well. And so that was some of the worst pain I've ever experienced in my life. And the thing about broken ribs is that there's really not much you can do. It's not like if you break a hand, you can still run, or when you
Mhm.
break a rib, you're out. And so
Mhm.
that moment was really serendipitous because we had these ideas of starting the business, but I was dead in my career fighting for titles. And so I had a good 6 months off.
Mhm.
And instead of just traveling or kind of messing around or getting in trouble, I was like, man, maybe there's something to this. Let's start this company. And so my
Wow.
sister and I just bootstrapped it to start and create a little shitty website and ordered some product and went down the whole route and like, let's launch it and see what happens. And little did we know it'd take off the way it did now. And so I ended up having one more fight, a title fight that at that point we had hired a bunch of people to help run it. I focused on boxing the last fight, retired, and then came in full-time CEO as the CEO of Soul.
That is just so amazing. So let's get into kind of the CBD industry because you and I know the pain, but I want to hear firsthand why having a CBD based company is different than another consumer packaged goods company. What do you see as like the pros and the cons of being in like the CBD industry?
Yeah. Well, the pros are if sourced correctly, it's a product that really works. I mean, we source it from hemp, for instance. It can be sourced from marijuana as well. But regardless, these cannabinoids have been used for thousands of years, and even THC.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to demonize THC. I think it has its place and its purpose. But CBD, CBN, CBG, like all these compounds in this plant have such incredible medicinal benefits. So that's the pro is it's something that works, right? There's so many cons, and it's definitely better than what it was when we first started. But in the beginning, merchant processing, for instance, we couldn't use US banks. So we were using overseas banks, kind of shady. I had money stolen from me. We were at crazy high rates. I think we were at like 5% processing fees.
Wow.
And then advertising, right? So as any new brand, it's like, how do you acquire new customers? And some of the main channels up until recently wouldn't even allow CBD or hemp language on there. Even today, there's still compliance issues. And so what I can say in the ads and how I can say it are still guarded so much more and restricted than other supplement brands, for instance. So it's tough to really scale on those channels. And then even like influencers. So, you know, for every 10 we reach out to, we'll find out that like maybe 3 want to work with us because we're CBD. And the other 7 are like, I just don't know yet. It's still a little taboo. Should I play with it? Should I not? So I think
Even
there's been
now, like, do you feel like, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no,
even
brilliant.
now, do you still feel like that?
Yeah, we still see that.
Wow.
So like Jazz, our community manager, is constantly reaching out different influencers, and we're still getting no's because we're CBD. Like
Mm-hmm.
the majority, I would say, which is wild. And so, and I get it. It's up to these influencers and these different partners and platforms. You know, we've done a handful of collaborations now with different brands, but we've done different like email swaps or Instagram swaps or giveaways with different brands, or that that we were prospecting, so to speak. And it's literally gotten to the 1 yard line, and they're like, all right, we're so excited about this. We love your brand. Oh wait, we talked to the lawyers and we can't do it because you're CBD. So,
Wow.
you know, there's just so many. Retail is a nightmare with CBD and hemp in general. So, you know, it's federally legal, but the compliance and everything just still hasn't caught up, and it's really been demonized for unfair reasons. So,
I
yeah.
agree. It's so interesting, to talk with you about this because I think that, we saw and we still continue to see such growth in the CBD industry, right? And even the THC industry. I think we see like brands, especially now like Soul, and then even brands more on the THC front like Can, where it's like you guys have really been able to capture the market and make it something digestible, but also something that goes against the traditional cannabis stereotype. But it's also one of those things where when you actually sit down and you talk with you realize how much red tape you guys actually have to jump through for a product that really is helping and making people to feel better.
Yeah. I mean, we could go down this rabbit hole left and right, but it's like the amount of ex FDA executives that end up working for pharmaceutical companies is pretty sickening. And even politicians working for FDA and pharmaceutical. And so that whole industry of lobbying has been one of the main reasons why hemp has been demonized, along with other reasons. Hemp really, in the beginning, hemp jeopardized paper. And paper was such a huge industry. And so since the 1920s, it's been demonized for that reason, and a lot of lobbying efforts and propaganda. So CBD has no liver toxicity, and they've done studies now. And what that means essentially is, you can't overdose on it. So when I say low risk, high reward, what I mean is, I could walk down the street today and go into CVS or Walgreens and go pick up Tylenol, ibuprofen, all these over the counter medications, take the whole bottle, overdose, and die. So the hypocrisy that's in our system right now because of lobbying and money has really held down and held back many natural supplements, everything from psilocybin and all the incredible studies we're seeing that helping depression and PTSD, down to non-psychoactive elements like CBD that don't get you high.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I was saying, I think we're just fighting the good fight, and it's not an if, but a when, and it's just going to take some time.
I love it. And I love that. I feel like we're seeing so much progression, like just what you were saying with like the different psychedelics and different therapy and things like that. As you're growing Soul and you're looking at the wellness, the kind of runway for wellness, and just, you know, the greater population starting to understand that there's more of a holistic approach, and, you know, there's a difference between kind of big pharma versus actual like plant-based medicine. Where are you going to be taking Soul? Like, what direction are you going to be taking the brand, and what's kind of exciting and on the forefront there?
It's something that we internally have been talking about for a long time now. We started to expand our non-CBD line for mainly all the reasons I just kind of mentioned. For us, CBD got us here, but at Soul, we really want to, you know, help people with anxiety, sleep, pain. We want to focus on some of those pain points and then insert our expertise, our doctor formulated ingredients, our process to that. So instead of saying, here's CBD, how can I solve a problem? It's what's the problem that our audience and customer base is dealing with, and how can we solve that? So we're expanding the wellness line that way. But even on the flip side, we're actually creating a THC line right now. Really excited about it.
Fun.
So it won't be under Soul, because I want to keep that very wellness and non THC, and our audience knows that. So it's going to have its own branding. We're still working on that, but hemp derived THC can be shipped direct to consumer to all 50 states. And so there are a lot of people that want to do that. And here's our idea. And this is, I think, kind of unique and fun. So often, I don't know about you, I'm not a huge consumer of THC, but when I do take a gummy, it's always too much, or I don't know how much I'm taking, right?
Yeah.
Or like you take that edible, you think you're fine, and then next thing you know, you're like in outer space, and like you wake up the next morning and you have a Postmates bill of like $300. So
Yeah.
For us, we wanted to kind of microdose a little bit, similar to similar to some of these other, to where if you're a busy mom, or you're a guy who just got done working out and you want to relax, or you want to go out to the bars, you don't want to drink. So we're going to formulate gummies that will have smaller doses in it, and ways that people can kind of work their way up and almost be like a wine replacement versus just going to the moon and getting high right off the bat.
I love that so much. And that is, I mean, that's also why I fell in love with Can, was because I didn't always want the alcohol, but I also didn't want the gummy. And I'm like notoriously like, I stay so far away from THC gummies because of that exact reason, where it just feels like it's like choose your own adventure, but you're really not sure what you're going to get. And I love that. So let me ask you this, you know, and I'm just so curious. Are you guys thinking or considering going down the mushroom route? Like, is there talks of like looking into like whether it's adaptogen based or even microdosing, like the psychedelic portion? Like, what does that look like for you? Or is that just not of any interest?
It's absolutely of interest. The issue is the compliance and regulation around it is extremely, extremely difficult. So right now we do have some mushrooms, non-psychoactive. So like lion's mane, reishi, all these incredible adaptogens. We have them in a lot of our products. But in terms of the psilocybin, no, as a company, it'd be difficult. But as a consumer myself, I mean, I actually was just on a special on ESPN E60 called Peace of Mind that aired last week. And it was myself and 3 other professional athletes that were part of these clinical studies on psilocybin and concussions and psilocybin and its effects on depression. And so we were in Jamaica last year with a team of doctors and going through the ceremony, and the special aired on ESPN E60 a couple of weeks ago. And so from that standpoint, I'm personally invested in it. I believe in it. I've seen it help me. I've seen it help other athletes, other people dealing with trauma. But, you know, from a business side, it would just, unfortunately, it'd be really too much of a hassle to try to get involved with. I'm going to stay in my lane on that end.
I love it. So I want to ask you, you know, I kind of want to move into you being an entrepreneur, because, you know, I feel like you have this mental like toughness, like from being like, you know, going into being a fighter, then going into being an entrepreneur. And like, even what you were saying, like, you know, you get knocked down twice, stand up a third time. Like, it just is kind of in you. knowing what you know now about launching a brand, whether it's CBD or, just launching a business in general, knowing what you know now, would you still do it? Would you go back and do it again?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I couldn't be a part of something that I didn't feel was mission driven.
Mm,
Especially being in a career where I had to deal with so much pain and so many ups and downs. Like if you don't have an ultimate why, like you'll never get through that type of career, ever become one of the best in the world at anything, whether it's sports or not. So I do have a huge why with this, and I think that's really important. I think there's a bunch of little things tactically that I would definitely do different
sure.
on the business side, but choosing to start, 10 out of 10, I would do it again.
I love that. So moving into like your community now, what
Mm.
has been some of the biggest learning lessons of actually building up an audience and or a community and like approaching these customers? I mean, you and Angie, I feel like both in your own right have established such strong personal brands. How was that approach when it came to Soul? What did that look like, when it came to actually kind of building a brand with influence that was mission led, but that also was attracting new customers and educating people on what CBD could do for them?
Yeah, I think we realized that we couldn't compete right off the bat financially or brand awareness with Charlotte's Web, with Medterra, with some of the big guys. And so if you're just starting a brand on your own, you have to think of what can I do differently? How can I compete where they can't compete? And you're never going to outspend them. You're never going to get more brand awareness. You're not going to get Kim Kardashian when they have the budget to and you don't.
Yeah.
So for us, we really wanted to start community first, brand second. And what I mean by that is everything between product ideation to launches to we have community taste tester squad that helps us choose the next flavors of our gummies. We are constantly asking and taking polls of our community on what they want. And Angie's in the DMs, I'm in the DMs. We've scaled to the point where we have a team now, and I definitely have to step back. But especially in the beginning, we leaned on Angie's audience, especially in terms of, she spoke about anxiety and her pain points were already built in. And I think if you're starting a brand, it needs to align with what your audience is also worried about and collect that information. I mean, if you're only posting about fashion and all of a sudden you're posting about wellness, well, that's a pretty fast 180. Like you have to get your audience to know, okay, why do I follow Mike Lee? Why do I follow Angie Lee? Why do I follow Soul?
Yeah.
So, getting aligned with that, I think was really important. And if anything, it didn't take us to the moon right away. It wasn't like we were one of these venture backed companies where you're like, spend at all costs. We don't care if you lose. We just want 2x growth every year. What you don't get with that is solid foundation. And what I mean by that is what I'm very proud of is our customer return rate, our conversion rate, our subscription rate, how sticky and strong our email list is. What it shows is that our customer base is very loyal and they are in it, and that we have a super high LTV. And that really isn't done with ad dollars. LTV is acquired through personal touch and through making sure the product and the company messaging and customer service is really on point. And so for us, once again, this was started as a little side hustle. So we didn't come at it from a financial standpoint of like, how do we grow this to $100 million? It's like, how do we help people and go from there?
That is, I mean, so beautiful and so well said. And I love that you touch on like kind of the strengths of both you and Angie, and then how you were applying that to the brand, but also how you were leading with that community first. I think, again, we see so many brands right now, especially in the CPG space, where it's like, it's just kind of feels like it's this quick roller coaster of like building up and doing all these things and spend. And like exactly like what you were saying, like kind of these VC backed companies that I feel like with Soul, you guys have just so established your audience in a way where you have built up that loyalty, you have given that education, but you also like keep them very in tune. Like I feel like, again, like you're very in touch with your community and what you guys are doing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think that, it helps having two co-founders that are on social media, and especially Angie, like she's the one that carries the weight on that aspect. But we like to do IG lives, and we like to, you hop on our website right now and there's a video of us, of me and Angie talking about our different products, and you can click on different options. It's like choose your adventure, but me and Angie telling you about the business. And so we don't want to tie the business entirely to us, but at the same time, we know early on in the growth stage, it's important that people, we're selling trust, right? Like you think about an industry that's really not very regulated and people don't know what to trust. And so there's very few companies where they can be like, oh, well, who can I complain to just in case, and unfortunately, that's me. So
Yep, I couldn't agree more, Mike. So as an entrepreneur, what were some of the learning lessons going into a product-based business? Like what were some, like if you could share with our audience right now, those that are, maybe they're in their career, they're wanting to become an entrepreneur, they're wanting to make the jump. What were some big learning lessons that you kind of experienced by building Soul?
Yeah, I think first of all, start small. Like there's no reason why you have to quit your job and put your entire 401k into something. Like test it out at a small scale and slowly like crawl before you walk, and just little bites at a time. And then I think the most important thing that I really credit some of our success to is that be willing to fail. And I know it sounds so cliche, and it's like you see every other podcast or motivational speech that says that, but like honestly, I'm willing to look stupid. I'm willing to lose. I'm not willing to say what if. I've been knocked out in front of 1 million people on TV. I've also won in front of 1 million people on TV. I'm not afraid to lose and look stupid because I know eventually I'll get there. And even today, there's times when I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out. And I'm not afraid to make mistakes. And so don't be afraid to make mistakes. There'll be learning lessons. Crawl before you walk, start small. And then the final thing is get your like brand positioning down and your idea of like what the roadmap looks like 1 year, 5 years, or 1 year, 3 years, 5 years out. I wish I did that in the beginning because now sitting 4 years in, we've gone through 2 rebrands, and rebrands are expensive. They're stressful. And the last one was a minor rebrand, but still like everything between label and website and messaging. And so, not that you can't rebrand, but get your blueprint and your plan, your mission, your core values, all that down from the get-go. Otherwise, you're trying to be 1 million things to 1 million different people. And to be quite honest, that's what I found sometimes we fall in the trap of and getting better at through messing up.
Absolutely. And I want to ask one follow-up question to that too, is what was kind of the moment where you were like, okay, this is now bigger than me and Angie and we need to scale this? What did that kind of look like? Because again, when people hear this, it sounds like maybe it's just you two and then you've built this team, but now you're actually scaling this to being one of the most recognized, wellness brands. So what did that kind of scalability look like? And when did you start making those moves?
Once again, we crawled before we walked with every decision. So, our first hire was customer service. And then I ended up finding someone who helped with the website. And then we knew at some point we needed a COO. We kept growing and growing, and we were bootstrapped in the beginning. So it was like we had to be profitable. So the crawl before you walk, I think is really important. There's never like one specific answer of like 8 weeks in, you should have this operator or this customer service. The beginning was me in a spare bedroom labeling stuff with Angie, me running to USPS every single day, like with the little blue padded envelopes. And it wasn't until about 1.5 years in, we were doing our own fulfillment. I was printing out the labels. I was just up at night, YouTubing, like literally the stupidest stuff, like how to print a label off ShipStation and like, what are USPS different rates? Like everything you want is on the internet. Like there's no excuse if you have the drive and you have that why. And so I just kind of taught myself step by step, and then we scaled along the way. And I think it's been a really cool process kind of learning. So there wasn't one pivotal moment where I was like, okay, time to take this to the next level. But I will say somewhat early on, I think maybe even a week in, there was a moment when one of the first orders came in that I didn't know who it was. Right. So like in the beginning, it was friends, family, even like friends of friends. Okay. I recognize them, appreciate the support. But then when someone came in who I noticed through social media had no connection to us and just found the brand, that was a wild moment of fulfilling that order and being like, oh, wow. Like people actually do want this. It's not just like my mom and her friends that are like supporting me, you know?
That's such a cool moment. And I totally feel that. I mean, jumping from the marketing agency into having to fulfill my own boxes and like living at the post office has been such an interesting move. But I also love that you're kind of talking about just being really kind of like self-driven into figuring things out and to kind of having that mindset of I'm going to get there. I'm going to figure it out. It's just a matter of time. And I think that that's something too I want to kind of highlight is that mindset that you have.
Yeah, and time is the most important word that you said, because then you get to a point where you have a whole different set of problems, right? And so I ran into problems to where I didn't have enough time. And also I was doing such a small stuff that I couldn't impact the business in a big way. So once again, going back to like, how can we compete? How can I compete differently? So my the best use of my time was no longer fulfilling and labeling. I had to figure out how to get more sales, how to grow the brand. So I hired out for that. And then the new set of problems that I'm still working on is like, we've got so many incredible operators. The business can start running on its own so much more. How do I stay out of the weeds, and how do I impact things on a big picture scale?
Yeah.
So that gets tough, because as an entrepreneur, it's like, this is my baby. And like, I want to have every little gift box that goes out or copy that's sent out. Like I want to look at it, but at some point you end up shooting yourself in the foot, like trying to micromanage.
I feel that. I mean, there's a reason why I stay off client calls nowadays, because I just end up making everything way more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah, totally.
I love it so much. Mike, you have been such a pleasure. I want to ask you one final question, and that is, what does influence mean to you?
I think influence has had a kind of a derogatory and like almost taboo sense in the past few years, for sure. But to me, I think true influence means being authentic and people responding to that. So nowadays, there's so much more transparency. And the more authentic you can be to who you are and what you are, that's how you influence people. And maybe you're only influencing one person, maybe it's 1 million people. But if you're not authentic to who you are, it'll come through sooner or later. And whatever that is for you, that's your competitive advantage. You know, no matter what walk of life you come, where you come from, what language you speak, your ethnicity, your traumas, your experiences, your wins, your losses, all of that, use that in authenticity to sell your product or message. So.
Well said. Well said. Mike, where can everyone find you? How can they shop Soul CBD or Soul? Are we rebranding to just Soul now? I believe so. Right?
Yeah, we're just Soul now.
Because we're moving into all the new wellness things. Where can everyone find you?
Right. Yeah, so we're our URL, our website for Soul is getsoul.com. Same with our handles, get.soul on Instagram, TikTok. Please reach out, DM us. I'm at official Mike Lee, and Angie is at Angie Lee Show. It's right there on the Soul IG, our handles. If you're also experiencing autoimmune issues or questions in CBD, I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Amazing, Mike. Well, thank you so much for going under the influence with us.
Cool. Thanks, Brittany.